So it looks like the Rams are going to end up hiring Mike LaFleur, at least in some capacity, most likely the offensive coordinator role that was vacated when Liam Cohen went back to Kentucky. But yeah, it looks like this is going to happen. As long as nothing falls through, this is going to happen. And I think this is actually really smart. So I have a lot of thoughts on this. And again, this is going to be another raw video. I know you guys have been liking it, so I'm going to keep doing it. But I have a lot of thoughts on this, and the reason why I'm a big fan of it is because, one, as you guys know, I covered the Jets this year, not as in-depth necessarily as the Rams, but I watched all their games, and I came to the conclusion that Mike LaFleur would be a good hire for the Rams before he was, announced as or likely the guy. We still don't know if he's going to be the guy. It feels like he's going to be the guy. And basically my takeaway is that this is somebody, his best games as a play caller were when Joe Flacco and Mike White were under center, not Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson had a very poor season. He showed some flashes at times, but that's been Zach Wilson's career with the Jets. It's been a lot of, oohs and ahs, but not able to make the layup throws. And that really hurt Mike LaFleur, I think, in those games. Now, I don't think Mike LaFleur should go blameless, but I definitely don't think he should have been fired. And I don't believe he was going to be fired. I think there was a lot of, high upside, up here where you have the ownership and you have the high brass going up ahead against a guy like Robert Saleh, and they won. And I think Saleh didn't really have a say in it. So what can we learn about Mike LaFleur if this is indeed the hire? Well, first off, he is the brother to Matt LaFleur, who was the Rams offensive coordinator in 2017 when they first birthed an incredible offense that was a complete 180 from the Todd Gurley dubbed high school offense in 2016. Now, here's the thing with Mike LaFleur. Mike LaFleur spent 4 years with the San Francisco 49ers with Kyle Shanahan, learning the ropes of that Kyle Shanahan offense, predominantly running the ball more than throwing the ball. And I think really what ended up happening this past year, and I'm not going to say it's entirely all due to not running the football, but as you guys know, I have been no stranger to critique Sean McVay on his ability to manage the run game. And I will say this, I don't think, and I said this, there are many videos beforehand, but I don't think they really cared about the run game that much. I think they looked at Matthew Stafford coming off, 1 year with the team, wins the Super Bowl. I think they got cocky. They go out and they get Allen Robinson. They're paying $15 million to a receiver they didn't really need, if we're being honest. They could have just kept Robert Woods, but they got cocky. They were going to expand on their passing attack. That was essentially what it felt, right? That's essentially how that went. And so the reason I say they got cocky is because it felt like they were kind of ignoring the running back room. It didn't feel at any point they felt truly, sold on either Cam Akers or Darrell Henderson or even Kyron Williams for that matter. And then furthermore, just to look at it, the running back room didn't really do all that much this year up until the end. Darrell Henderson showed flashes, but they didn't stick to him. Cam Akers had a couple decent games early on this season. They didn't stick to him. 14 carries, and now all of a sudden you're the lead back in LA. That's not enough. So here's the thing. Mike LaFleur, you see what the running backs were doing, not just Breece Hall. And Breece Hall looked really good before he got hurt. But he managed Breece Hall and Michael Carter. And then towards the end of the year, they weren't as good of a running game because, they didn't have Breece Hall anymore since he was out for the year with a torn ACL, but they still managed it. They still used Ty Johnson. They still used Michael Carter. They used Zonovan Bam Knight, who was a UDFA, and James Robinson, who they traded for. So they were using the run game. And I feel as though Sean McVay is making this hire. For those of you who don't want this, unfortunately, I don't think you're going to like this, but I think Sean McVay will be calling plays again in 2023, 2024 season. I think that's how it's going to go. And I honestly think that you heard the Frank Reich rumors because I think that was brought upon when discussing it with Sean. hey, why don't you give up play calling, and maybe that'll be easier for you. Maybe it's a lot of workload, a lot on your plate. You bring in a guy like Frank Reich and all that. And I think that's why his name came up. Mike LaFleur kind of is of the mold that Sean McVay, prefers as an offensive coordinator. He's a young guy. He is, he had some cutting edge play calling in 2020. They weren't a good football, or 2021. They weren't a great football team. The Jets weren't. They won 4 games, and this year they won 7. But he had some moments where you're like, ooh, I like what he's doing here. Here's the thing. Sean McVay needs to get back to running the football. And I understand you don't have Todd Gurley, but the way Cam Akers play at the end of the season offers some extreme possibility that you could have something big there. Mike LaFleur gets you back on that path. Mike LaFleur's from the Shanahan tree. Shanahan likes to run the ball more than he likes to throw it. Actually, Shanahan loves to run the ball, okay? Not just likes, loves. And Mike LaFleur likes using the running backs, not just as running the ball, but also as weapons out of the passing game. And, that's another thing. This past year, Mike LaFleur used the running backs more than basically any year that Sean McVay has coached the Rams out of the backfield. 87 receptions out of the backfield this year for Mike LaFleur's running backs. And I have a whole summary and report and, all that research, as you guys know. It's in my community tab on my channel. You can check that out. But really the whole point is that Mike LaFleur is going to help bolster the running backs. He's going to bring that energy back. And I feel like Thomas Brown kind of showed you, Sean McVay hires, and don't get me wrong, I like the idea of hiring Rashad Samples. I think he was a little too quick to just hire a guy who didn't really have any experience in the NFL. And actually, in the recent Jordan Rodriguez and Rich Hammond 11 Personnel podcast that I heard, Jordan Rodriguez had mentioned he basically talked to Sean McVay for 15 minutes and he got hired. Now, I don't know if that's a legit quote. Like, she said that. I don't know if that's exactly what it was, 15 minutes. But if she was just saying, it was just like 15 minutes is like he barely talked to him. Okay, regardless, the point still stands. The running game, as they both agreed on the podcast, great podcast, by the way. You should go check that episode out. But as they both agreed on, the run game instantaneously changed for the better, not to knock on, and I've already said this on, Believe in Rams. I've said this on DTR, and not a knock against Rashad Samples because he's young. He was like the youngest coach. But as soon as Thomas Brown took over, the run game started to emerge. And I don't think there's a coincidence there. But now you have Thomas Brown, interviewing elsewhere, and who knows what ends up happening with him. So I think you bring in LaFleur, okay, as your offensive coordinator. And I think Sean McVay is going to continue to call plays. But I think, as the podcast brings up, and as I've been thinking as well, kind of funny, I was just thinking about this, then I heard the podcast, and I was like, wait a minute. Sean McVay and company kind of created this opportunity because the way the NFL is, it's a copycat league, all of that. And obviously, if you're in the Super Bowl, everyone knows what you're doing. Everyone gets a chance to watch you. They can take notes, all that. But what was really interesting to me is how, Sean McVay and company, they created such dynamic offenses over the last half decade or so that teams have now been running that more soft shell coverage, which has opened up a more lighter front, also known as a lighter box. And when you have a lighter front, that means you don't have as many bodies in the trenches, right? You're not playing with a bunch of linebackers and safeties in the box. And it's a lot easier to run the ball when you have to get through 5-6 guys than when you have to get through 8-9 guys. And you guys have heard me say the term light boxes a lot because, you look at Darrell Henderson, the Cam Akers video that I, compared the two, and I used that word a lot, is that, they were seeing light boxes and Henderson was running well against them. I mean, you should run well against them. But we saw an increase this year. We saw an increase in the run game, just in general in the NFL. And to me, I feel like when you're looking at the run game, you're looking at all the usage in the run game and everything, and how, you have Josh Jacobs have a career year. Austin Eckler, he had 20 touchdowns. He was nuts. There's so much more usage in the run game now to combat the fact that now the defense has opened themselves up to getting gashed with that light box, that light front. And I think Sean McVay missed the boat on that. And I had been saying it all year, essentially. Like, Sean, you got to run the ball more. This is ridiculous. But this was a golden opportunity that Sean has to know he missed. And I think the hiring of, Mike LaFleur, to me anyway, the hiring of Mike LaFleur kind of signals that he realizes he needs to start caring about the running backs again. Not as a secondary piece. They need to be a focal point of the offense. So stock up for Kyren Williams if they get Mike LaFleur as OC, as long as this doesn't fall through. It seems pretty solid from what I'm hearing. But, stock up for Kyren Williams, stock up for Cam Akers. Maybe they go out and get another running back, stock up to him as well. Stock up to the passing game. Here's the thing. When you have a defense that the Rams run, that is more bend, don't break oriented, and then teams start copying that, right? You started a trend, and this is a league full of trends. Who's to say that just because Sean McVay is trying to figure out the running game and everything this year, who's to say the whole shift in the NFL goes away from the run game next year? Because teams adapt, and there are trends. That's why there are years where there's a quarterback that throws for 5,500 yards, like Peyton Manning, and there are years where the number one quarterback in passing threw for 4,600. We probably won't see that now that there's 17-game schedule, but you get my point. It's a trending type of league. That you see these waves, these shifts, that's essentially how it is. And right now, going out, getting Mike LaFleur, at least ensures, at the very least, that Sean McVay hears us, he hears you, he hears me, he hears other people about the run game. And that's a good thing. So if you want to know anything about Mike LaFleur, is that he's bringing that Kyle Shanahan, knowledge. And another thing is that Sean McVay wants to go back, and they also touched on this on the podcast, Sean McVay wants to go back to doing what he was doing. He wants to help these guys out. He wants to help a Mike LaFleur out. He wanted to help a KOC out. Do you know why? He wants to help them move on. He wants it to be a mutually beneficial thing. McVay brings in a coaching prospect. He pushes him to head coach. He goes out the door. The coaching tree grows wider. And Sean McVay, let's be honest here, his coaching tree as of right now, you have Kevin O'Connell. You have Matt LaFleur, right? You have Zach Taylor, Brandon Staley. Those are 4 guys. He has a chance to make that 7 guys this offseason. Raheem Morris is interviewing for jobs. Ejiro Evero is interviewing for jobs. And Thomas Brown is interviewing for jobs. And not just jobs, head coaching jobs. If all 3 of them were hired, the Rams would get 4 third-round picks due to Thomas Brown, Raheem Morris. But more importantly, if all of them were hired, Sean McVay did his job, and he's got the craziest coaching tree. He already has one of the craziest coaching trees ever, but 7 head coaches in 7 years of coaching, going into a 7th year. 7 head coaches. There are 32 teams, and he's head coaching one of the teams. So 7 out of the 31 teams are part of Sean McVay's coaching tree, if that happens. That is incredible. And so it shows you this is mutually beneficial. Mike LaFleur honestly shouldn't have been fired. It seems like, the head coach didn't even want to fire him, and Robert Saleh. That's the first thing. But the second thing is it's mutually beneficial because he gets to keep the same spot. He just doesn't play call anymore. But Sean McVay has shown that he can prop these guys up to the next level. Liam Cohen, it didn't work out. But it worked out with Zach Taylor. It worked out with Matt LaFleur, his brother. He saw it firsthand. And it worked out, of course, with Kevin O'Connell. So Mike LaFleur, wasn't that long ago, people were talking about him, this young up-and-coming guy with, the 49ers. He could be a head coach. And he goes to the Jets, and, well, they don't have a lot of success, so he doesn't get a chance, and he gets fired. But if he goes to the Rams, this is a golden opportunity for him. As long as they all stay healthy, he's got a lot to play with. He's got a great coach in Sean McVay, a great, teacher, somebody to learn from. But it's mutually beneficial because it's not just pushing him to the next level. He's also scratching Sean McVay's back. He's going to put an emphasis into the run game. He's going to help with game planning. He's going to help with play calling, I'm sure. He's going to be like Kevin O'Connell. He'll call some plays. He's not going to be the primary play caller, but I'm sure he'll help. Audibles, things like that. And I think getting that Kyle Shanahan-esque, the little wrinkles that Shanahan has with his offense, getting that in the building is only going to benefit the Rams. It's only going to benefit Sean McVay, and it's only going to evolve and transform this offense from what it was. You have more knowledge. Jordan, basically called it an incubator. And I think that makes a lot of sense because you have your ideologies and then you bring in other guys who have their ideologies. So it's a win-win because now you're pushing guys out the door, not in a get out of here, we need to, fill this role way, but you're pushing guys out the door that you're developing. So yes, your coaching tree is getting better and that's great. That's great for your legacy. But you're still able to help these guys out and still gain from it. It's not a parasitic relationship. It's not like these guys are coming into the Rams organization, having a cup of coffee with Sean McVay and becoming a head coach like some people would have you believe. That's not the case at all. Kevin O'Connell had to work for it. He came in after Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur was the OC in 2017. He left in 2018 to go to be the Titans head coach or the Titans offensive coordinator. And the reason for that is because he wanted play calling experience. And Sean McVay didn't block that move because he wasn't going to give up the play calling. Because at the end of the day, as much as I may be a critic of Sean McVay's play calling, I think last year was a complete outlier. I don't think he's that bad of a play caller. I think a lot of things happened. I think he's going to look at it. It's kind of like I said. I mean, he's already on it. He's already interviewing offensive coordinators and coaches and whatnot. But it sounds to me like LaFleur's going to be the guy. And while he doesn't have a boatload of success, I do think this is somebody that Sean is going to get the most out of. And I think he is going to help, big time. I think bringing that ideology into this organization is going to be huge. I'm not saying, this is the thing. I get Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan. They come from the same coaching tree. They have similar concepts. But to act like Sean McVay has everything the 49ers do would be ridiculous. And to act like the 49ers right now are the same offense that they were with Mike LaFleur would also be ridiculous. But still, it has to count for something. And at the very least, he's learned from Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh built that defense. Don't get me wrong, DeMeco Ryans is great, but Robert Saleh built that defense. Don't forget, that defense was nasty with Robert Saleh. And Saleh just spent 2 years, he spent 2 years with LaFleur. So LaFleur definitely knows some things about Saleh. I mean, let's not, act ignorant to the fact he definitely could know more about the defense than, just because he's an offensive coordinator doesn't mean he's not learning about his own defense. I think there's a lot to learn here. I think there's a lot to take away from. And I think this is a mature decision on the part of Sean McVay. He may be buddies with him, and I know people are going to go to that level. And there's also going to be people that push back and say he should be making Thomas Brown the offensive coordinator. I don't think Thomas Brown is an offensive coordinator. You know why? Because if he was, then he already would have been hired as such. He's an assistant coach, he's assistant head coach, he's a running backs coach, and he's a tight ends coach. And they wanted to teach him more of the offense. They wanted to get him more, his feet more wet, so to speak. But why is he interviewing for head coaching jobs instead of offensive coordinator jobs? And that's not to say he doesn't take one. I mean, there are rumors that Brandon Staley is going to go after, Zach Robinson. He's going to go after Thomas Brown. Both of them will. Raheem Morris would probably, and Coach Giro Evero. So 3 guys there to keep in mind that they could be plucking these guys. This coaching staff could be vastly different. I don't know. We don't know, but I will say that, don't be surprised if LaFleur does work out and he ends up being a head coach next year. And I know that's crazy because he's not even calling plays at that point. But I really believe that this is somebody who you could already see it. And some of the play designs he had, you could already see he's got some cutting edge stuff. He needs more refinement, but I could definitely see him being a head coach sooner than later. So in conclusion, it doesn't change the fact that, look, I did want Frank Reich. I wanted, I wanted a play caller. So Sean McVay didn't have all that work on his plate. I wanted a guy that was less likely to leave. LaFleur's going to be a hot name after next year if they have a good year. So, that's something. But if they do indeed go with LaFleur, because they have not announced it yet, but it's all signs point to yes, they're going after him and he's going to be the guy. If they do go with him, I think it's the right move. And I'm actually, believe it or not, back on the, okay, we'll do this thing. I'm back on that train with Sean McVay calling the plays. I think last year took a lot out of him. I think there were some things that O'Connell did that, don't get necessarily mentioned. And I think there were some things that, they wanted Cohen to do, that O'Connell did. And I think it put more on Sean McVay's plate than he was expecting. I think last year just was a tough year for McVay. There was a lot to manage and there were all those injuries and what have you. And I just think it was kind of the perfect storm in a bad way, if you will. So those are my thoughts on just the whole thing, not just Mike LaFleur. This isn't just a why they should hire Mike LaFleur video. I believe he's already been hired or he's going to be hired, since all signs are pointing to that. But it's just to let you know where I see this coming from, kind of why they're doing something like this, why they're going with him. It may not be the biggest name. It's not like going out and getting Lincoln Riley. But I think at one point or another, if you said the Rams were getting Mike LaFleur from the Niners, back in the day, this would have been a massive name. And it was only like 2 years ago. So I would just say give this guy his due, give him a chance. I think good things can definitely come from this. The point is, I think Sean McVay realizes he missed an opportunity to take advantage of a year where you could have run the ball extremely well. And I think he missed an opportunity to win a lot of those games because he abandoned the run. And now he's getting a guy who's, running back oriented, running back minded. And I think he's going to help out the offense in a big way. So hope you guys enjoyed. That's all I got for you. We'll see what ends up happening with this whole thing. I'll keep you guys posted, of course. You can go follow me at JK Bogan and be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. I'm out of here. Later, folks.